So I'm going to talk to you about not done yet, which is exactly what you want to hear after you spent all of this time. This notion that, what do you mean we're not done yet? How much more do we need to do? How much more square footage do we need? How much more floor restoration? What other materials can we have? And the answer is, first of all, you deserve to celebrate. Take a moment that many of you may know this, but if you don't, building an expansion at the level that you are, with the lack of municipal support that you have, is an incredible feat. You deserve an amazing amount of credit for that. That is not something that is usual to do. But of course, the reason you're doing that is because you're never done, right? Something's always going to change. Something else is going to come. That is the nature of working in a dynamic world. This is a place that has changed on a regular basis from when Rockefeller said it was his backyard, right? This is the notion that we are having new things to work with, new populations, new challenges. And so what you are building physically and in the more important network is a platform. You're building a powerful platform in which to improve the world and lives of the citizens and those who come to Bar Harbor. That's an amazing thing to do. But what does improve mean? What will it mean tomorrow? What will it mean in 100 years? And will we be prepared to do that as well? So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to walk through a little bit about this notion of platform. Can everyone hear me all right, by the way? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about platform. I want to talk then about some of the changes that are coming up and some of the challenges that we're going to encounter, and some of what it means to shift from serving a community to saving a community. My argument is that libraries that have so long been cast as a service, a place you can come and get service, you can get books, you can get materials, to some place that is going out into the community to see where it can make improvements, how it can help. And some of that we're going to talk about through literacy and taking juvenile delinquents off the street. But some of that we're going to talk about going even beyond that. So I'm going to start with the notion of a platform, because I'm often asked, what's the best library you've been to? Or what's the future library look like? And the answer is, there is no one answer to that question. The future, there are as many futures of libraries as there are communities being served. The future of this library looks radically different than where I live in Austin, Texas. It looks different than what it looks like in the Netherlands. It looks different in different areas. But there's a common thread that comes through that. So I want to give you an example. I want to talk about the platform, and I'm going to take you through South Korea to do that. And you're going to say, Dave, we're in Maine. What do we have to do with South Korea? Actually, a remarkable amount. But I want to give you an example that when I'm going to talk about several libraries there, and I'm going to talk about the principles they use to organize the library. And I will tell you that if you flew to South Korea and you went to go to see some of the major municipal libraries, you wouldn't see the ones I'm going to show you. Because the ones I'm going to show you are the neighborhoods. They're the small libraries. I talk about it before I get into it. There's one library in the streets of South Korea that's very much like this, that they have books and shelves, but they're all on wheels, so they can wheel them out of the way and do exactly what's happening here. Have a meal, convene, and come together. One library, there's a school, an alternative school. Parents got together and they said, there's so much pressure on our children to pass the exam and get into college, and it's just not how we want to raise our children. And so they created their own school with their own library. And the way it works is the children will get dropped off, and the librarians and the teachers will meet the students at the bus stop. They'll walk through the rice paddies, up through the hills, and into their library, about a 20-minute walk every morning, as a chance for them to remember and reconnect to the world that they're a part of. Right? These are the kinds of things that may not work in all settings, but they work for them. So that's what I want. And it gives me a chance to show pretty pictures, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to start with a negative example, and please don't tell them I use this because they'll be mad at me. Busan is a city in the southern part of the peninsula, And many people, I did not know this until I went there, the vast majority of the land in the Korean Peninsula, in South Korea in particular, is mountainous. There's very little flat land. So everything is built vertically. Everything you get are just major high-rises and apartment buildings and things of that nature. And Busan is this beautiful city. It's a very rich city. It's doing well. The parliamentary library, the library that serves the government, is up in Seoul. But they wanted to show, this is not at all something we're used to for politicians, that their money could flow back to where they came from. And so they decided to build a second parliamentary library in Busan. And it's a beautiful library. It has everything that you're supposed to have as a beautiful library. It has, for example, it has places where you can take Instagram photos and TikToks, so you can pose before things. It has the staircase. Now, I'm guessing you guys don't have a staircase in this, but if you look at sort of all the modern architecture, everyone has these massive staircases that are also places you can sit and study, etc. And they have that. And they have these screens, and it's beautiful. It is beautiful. It is empty, but it is beautiful. It is sitting in the middle of an industrial park way away from the city, and they have children's areas in a parliamentary library, because nothing says, hey kids, what should we do this Saturday? Think I'll do some legislative histories. But it's beautiful. Right? I point this one out because I say that, but this middle screen, if you can't see it, it's all right, don't worry. It's full of book covers. And that's the most checked out books. It's sort of popularity index. And they're all children's books. And you go, oh, kids must be checking out lots of books. No. All the adults and grandparents are checking them out for their kids. And so it drives all their usage up to the top. It's fun. The point of this is, if you asked me, could you show me a beautiful piece of architecture? If you said, is this the future of library? I could say, I don't think even the citizens of Busan think this is the future of libraries. They have other places they go to. I want to show you the guerrilla librarians. I want to show you the librarians that are deciding they want to build libraries in a different way. These are the librarians that build libraries on corners of the commuting rail, that build libraries in the subways. I know that you guys have a few visitors in the summer, right? How do you serve a transient population? How do you serve a population, affluent population, that comes in and out on a regular basis? In the beaches of Brazil, they actually have libraries that set up beachfront libraries, because that's where the action is, that's where the need is, and it also decreases the stress on their infrastructure further in. Right? Coming up with solutions and understanding these are important. So, I want to talk about, for example, the TT Island Library. The TT stands for Teens and Tweens. South Korea is in a very interesting position. They do not have enough children. It's actually, by the way, a situation that is increasingly shared here in the US. We are not producing enough children to replace ourselves. We're not doing our job and coming up with our 2.2 children on a regular basis. I got the 2. The 0.2, I bought a dog, but apparently doesn't count. Anyway, they know that this is precious, because these are the people who are going to inherit this peninsula when they're done. And so they're trying to figure out, how can we take care of this precious resource? So this group, it was a foundation called the Reading Arts Foundation, began going into large municipal libraries, and they began building children's centers. Actually, teens and tweens, right? The first thing they found out is that teens and tweens want nothing to do with the rest of the children. So they began building these spaces. And they didn't just come in and build, they had cities that had to apply and go through a 6-month process to get this. They had to have their city planners, their architects, and their librarians go through 2 years of training to open one of these. And they finally decided to create their own as a laboratory environment. It's a 4-story structure. I had to visit this library before 10 o'clock when it opened, because adults are not allowed in the building after it opens, except for the librarians. And by the way, I know I've earned every gray hair and lack of hair here. These librarians look like children to me. I was like, oh, the teens are here. Like, no, those are the librarians. I'm old. Anyway, they came in, and what was amazing about this is, even though we were there early, the director was showing me through, we got into an elevator, 4th floor, and there was a girl, 11 years old, sitting in the corner. As we went in, the girl reached out and wrapped her arms around the director to give her a hug. And the director looked down and said, "Hey, how's it going? You're here early. Are you still working on this project? Is that still happening?" There was a relationship that was there. That line, apologies for the pictures, but you can sort of see this fuzzy line. That line is where I wasn't able to cross over. The members of this library, the teens and tweens, are given RFID bracelets that allow them in and out of these spaces. Once they get in and out of these spaces, yes, there are some books and materials, but there are also, for example, massive editing suites to do music and video. Now, here's what's really interesting. If you want to use that, you have to find another child to teach you how to use it. That's not what the librarians do. They're not sitting there doing tech support. The kids are supporting themselves in doing that. There are, yes, books and materials. They have a dance studio so that people can go in and learn, because K-pop's a thing, and there are people doing TikToks and all this other stuff. These are the spaces that they have. So they have newest volumes and a full drum kit to do it in, because that's what that community's looked like. And it's in a not very affluent part of Seoul. And they say when the hour hits, when about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the school's let out, you can just see these lines of students coming down the hills into their space. It's an amazing place. The other one I want to talk about is the Gusandong Village Library. And this is the story that I think you guys might resonate with, because it's very much the heroes of the community investing in and building a library. So it begins with a small, poor community in Seoul. It was predominantly single mothers living in this area because it was affordable. And so single mothers were in this area. They were doing primarily service occupations. They were cleaners, etc. And they got together and they found that their children were not being well served by the official library. They would go in and all the children wanted to read was manga, basically graphic novels, comic books, etc. And the official library said, "No, we don't do that. We only do good stuff." And the parents were sitting going, "I want my child to read. I don't care if they read the right stuff or they read. And you should do this." No. So they got together. They went to the city council and said, "You're building us a library." They motivated and activated themselves. And the town council said, "Yes, we are building you a library." And this group of mothers not only didn't stop there, they began touring not only within Korea, but within Asia to find the best libraries. They began training their own people to become the librarians, and they then built their own library. There in Korea, unlike here, they don't have boards, but they do at this library because they insisted on continuously being connected. They took 6 buildings. 6 buildings, they're about 6 stories tall. And they combined them into one library. And then when they were talking to the architect, they said something like, "It cannot be taller than any other building in this neighborhood. We are not above them." The buildings themselves were apartments, so they're very compartmentalized. And the architects wanted to basically blow out all the internal structure, and they said, "No, this community is used to living in apartments. They are expecting this space. We will work around their expectations." And the image you can see here in the middle is of the manga collection, not the manga collection they bought to provide to the kids, but the mangas that the kids created to share with themselves. They built facilities, they built infrastructure, they built storage to help the kids communicate and express in the medium that they felt was best. They built this library from the ground up. This was the village. So these are the kinds of things that you begin to look at. There's these libraries. If you come tomorrow night, thank you. I'm going to do more show and tell. Got some other libraries to talk about, but they're places that express the values and interests. There's one library, the Mapo Library, where at noon, all of the city, the town that built it, built the schools and the library to work together. So at noon, all the children, rotating schools, leave their schools, go to the library to the 6th floor, and they do all of their arts education in the library. They have drawing studios, writing studios, dance studios, instruments, music. They have pianos, all of this stuff going on. And you're saying, "So if I want to learn to play the piano, can I?" And they're like, "Well, we'll charge you." But the kids get it for free. They've combined and connected in such a way that they're deeply ingrained in all aspects of that community. Now, I'm going to give you another example, but this isn't in Korea. This is in Texas. This is up in Texlahoma, which is right on the border. And it is Pottsboro, Texas. Has anyone been to Pottsboro, Texas? You lie. You've never been to Pottsboro, Texas. Has a population of 2,000. If you bring in the county, it gets really close to 3,000. And it is an old post office. And the person you're seeing here, this is Diane Connery. Diane Connery came from a background in advertising. She moved into Texlahoma because it's by a lake. You get the point. She went to a town council meeting. They said, we're going to close the library. We don't have the resources. We don't want to run it. It's an old post office. Who cares? And she goes, I'll do it. She says, I'll do it on one condition. You don't pay me. They said, okay. And the answer was, because the minute you tell me what I have to do, or the minute you tell me what I can't do, I'm leaving. So she came in, and I'll tell you, the collection is not startling. But what she's managed to build in this itty-bitty little town is she has built a Digital Explorer program. It's experts and tutors who work with seniors primarily on how to use technology. My son bought me this thing. I don't know how it works. Help me. I want to be really clear. I don't want to paint a broad brush here. There are certainly people of age that grew up with the technology, can use it better than any kid. But by and large, there were a large population that needed that help, that the new web service was coming and the new lingo and et cetera. And these digital explorers would work with them on how they could hook up a printer and use technology, get online, do Facebook, connect into an individual. She created a digital gaming team. They teamed with a local community college. Teenagers would come in and they would do online gaming competitively. She built a library of things. You could come and check out shovels and drills and all these other things. She created, they broadcast something called White Space Spectrum. They put this 50-foot powered tower in their parking lot, and they beamed free wireless internet to everyone within a 2-mile radius. Right? The point that she brought was, I didn't do this because I wanted to hang out with the books. I did this because a library helps people fulfill what they want to do, helps them improve. And yes, reading is essential, but there are other ways of doing this. One of the things that happened during the pandemic is we all remember the pandemic. You might also remember that there was a quick push towards telehealth. The notion is that if you're sick, you can go online, you can get information. The problem with telehealth when you're in Pottsboro, Texas, is the nearest hospital is 2 hours away. And the other thing is, for parents, you may be in a not so spacious living quarters, and this isn't when you want to be talking to your doctor. Having intimate conversations about bodily functions next to your children, not always fun. So they took literally a broom closet, cleared it out, put high-speed internet and a computer with video, a separate external door so no one knew who went in and went out. They teamed with that hospital 2 hours away, and they have a telehealth center now going back and forth on a regular basis. Why a library? Well, in Diane's words, no one else was doing it. This is what my community needed to be better. And that's what it looked like. So what things look like in Seoul, Korea, what things look like in Busan, what things look in Pottsboro, what things look like in Bar Harbor, they look like their communities. And so the question is, what do we, because I'm retiring here, what do we need out of this library? What do we need it to be? And that's where we need to begin to think about not just what happens in this building, not what happens here. I understand there might be a strategic plan going on. Always fun. Here's the worst question you can ever ask on a survey or of the community. What do you want from your library? Why is that a horrible question, you ask? 1, they don't know. 2, it's not their job to know. And what we know from technology is when you ask someone about a system, right? What do you want from your phone? What do you want from your television? What do you want from whatever? What do you want from your car? People can only answer in response to what already exists. They want more of something or they want less of something. So I have zero doubt that they said children's collections and children's spaces. I have large doubt that they said teen competitive online gaming programs. But if you ask the teens, what do they want? What do they need? So what you do is you don't go out to the community and say, hey, we're here. We want to help. How can we help? Because what they'll do is they'll revert back to what they knew. And oftentimes, John Palfrey, who's the president of the MacArthur Foundation, wrote a book called Bibliotech, and he said one of the things that libraries must constantly work against is nostalgia. I'm going to get back to this in a moment, I promise. Nostalgia is, I fell in love with libraries when I was 10. I stopped using them when I was 12. Very different story, right? And now I'm on the board, and so I expect it to be a library like it was 40 years ago. And through the eyes of a 12-year-old, right? They don't see what happens behind the stacks. They don't know what interlibrary loan is. They don't know what RFID systems are. They don't know what the amazing trying to revitalize the lumber industry of Maine is like, right? And so instead, go out and say, what are we talking about? What are we talking about on community radio? What are we talking about when we go out to meals? What are we talking about on the beach? What are we talking about in the schools? What are we talking about in City Hall? What are we talking about when we have those town hall meetings, right? Which is an amazing asset that exists almost nowhere else but Maine and New England. How do we take advantage of those things? So we need to follow that up with not just seeing what we can do here, but what we can do there. And so we need to begin shifting the concept of a library from something that serves, that waits, that is in here, into something that acts and shapes and is out there. We need to work from serving our communities to saving our communities, because our communities are under a great amount of stress. I mean, that's a global statement, and I would love to find a time when we could have simply said that was not the case. But I think in particular, keeping politics out of it right now, cruise ships, right? Land values, migration status, workers for the industry. These are times of extraordinary stress. How can a library begin to tackle those issues? How can we take that on? And I'm going to start easy. Here's easy. This is the answer that many people come to. You will not be able to read any of these slides. They're now notes for me, so apologies. Literacy. The first 2,000 days of a human being's lives are crucial to child development. 2,000 days. In 2,000 days, this table that you can't see, but I will provide online. Within the first 2,000 days, we have amazing general brain growth, language acquisition. Neuropsychologists and cognitive psych people are increasingly realizing that your brain has time periods when they turn on and off moldability. That right around, for example, around 1 and 2, the brain says, I need to learn language, and it's open to it. And then when you turn 55, good luck learning another language. Your brain isn't set to do it. So we need to be there for language at that time. We need to talk about syntax and phonology, semantics, social skills. Learning to write happens in these 2,000 days. So what happens in that room is important. But what happens at home is also important. There's a great story where we worked with local communities, the local library, the local schools, and we were working with parents. And we were trying to talk about the importance of literacy. And so we had this great literacy teacher, and she was demonstrating how to do story time. This isn't something that they teach you how to do, right? The kid comes home, the manual's been lost, it's hungry, you're tired. Oh my God, how do I read to this kid? I remember because my child, when he was first working on reading in like kindergarten and first grade, my wife and I did what we were supposed to do. We'd get in bed, we'd get the book, we'd read the book. That's what we're supposed to do. Read to us, Riley, read to us. And he hated it. And he went to the teacher and said, what did we do? And the teacher said, she was very nice. So, Riley reads the books to you. I said, yes. Does he get all the words right? I said, no. Do you correct him when he gets the words wrong? Well, yeah, we tell him what the right one is. Do you like being told you're stupid? I said, oh, right? This idea of how you do story time is not something built in. So this teacher was doing this for parents. And after the teacher was done, one of the parents came up to the teacher and she goes, on this page, what did you say on this page? On this page, what was it that you said? I'm trying to remember what you said on this page. And as she went in, the teacher realized that this mother was illiterate. She couldn't read. But by God, she was going to memorize this book because her child was going to be able to read. There's another library in Fayetteville, New York, that has an early literacy teacher volunteers the time. She said, I don't want to do story hour, I have to do that all day. But what she put together were toolkits. So you could get a board book, something for the kid to chew on, and a toy that went with it. So for example, one of the things to teach reading is to bring physical concepts into the written word, right? When this happens, it's written this way. And so this will be a book on trucks, and it's one of these toys where you roll it out and it rolls back to you. So what do these literacy toolkits look like? Yes, what happens in that room is important and essential. But what happens in the evening afterwards is also important and essential. And just like we talk about this idea of literacy in terms of early literacy, we also have to realize there's real important data we need to work on. For example, it turns out that if children are not reading at grade level by grade 3, their odds of completing high school go down dramatically. And what's worse is the odds of incarceration go up dramatically if people do not finish high school. So if you want to deal with an incarceration issue, you start at 3rd grade reading. That's where you begin to make the difference. When Boeing moved its manufacturing to South Carolina, they began to go hire people that could work in good manufacturing jobs. But when these workers showed up, they found out they were all computer-aided manufacturing jobs. It wasn't simply a matter of learning how to do a press. They had to have some basic technology skills. They went to hire and they couldn't find enough ready workforce. So they went to the high schools and they did what you do, STEM programming and 3D printers. And they found out the kids in high school, it was too late. They couldn't read. So they began investing in 3rd grade reading, in tutoring and programs like that. So in Bar Harbor, when we look at industry, even if it's the tourism industry, what do we want from the boats? Well, maybe we want investment in our 3rd grade reading language, and we partner with this library so that we make sure that that's happening in and out. When we partnered with youth librarians in one public library with literacy teachers in an at-need school, we found out the problem that these folks were using the same words, but meaning very different things. For example, when a reading teacher talks about enrichment or literacy, they're talking about things like decoding, letter and semantics, and sounding and phonetics, right? Sort of a lot of cognitive work. But when the librarian was talking about learning and literacy engagement, they meant learning enrichment and they meant love of reading. I'm trying to find them the right book so they'll love reading. Well, they can't read, so they're not going to love it. They're going to be reminded what they can't do. So just having the schools and the library work together to say, what are you teaching? Where can we be? How can we support it moving ahead? Even universities down the road, so that the summer, there are people who are in here studying, my guess is. In the summer they're working, in the winter they're probably doing online classes. What kind of support do we have going for those learners as well? So in South Carolina, we built Cocky's Reading Express. This is Cocky. Go Cox. Spurs up. Cocky, there were 2 Cockies at the University of South Carolina. One worked for the athletics department, did what you would think he did. The other worked for me as the head of the library program. Because what we did is we took Cocky and we put him literally on a bus, filled it full of undergraduates, drove them to the poorest schools in South Carolina, and did reading, and made them take Cocky's pledge. They had to pledge to read so much time. Now, that means nothing up here. Football. We have to talk football for a moment. Football is not just a cult, it is a demonic and dangerous cult. In South Carolina, if you are reared by that 3rd grade reading level, by 3 years old, you are either pre-committed to South Carolina and be a Gamecock, or to Clemson, in which case we don't care what the hell we call you. But the point is, right, having sports and this thing they love, etc., come out and say the importance of reading is all they needed. So literacy programs that begin doing it. But we need to go beyond just reading. We need to talk about people will not read if they're hungry. People will not come into a library where they do not feel safe. People will not, whether that's intellectual safety or physical safety. Libraries should be a safe place to explore dangerous ideas. How can we make that happen? So let's talk about some other literacy that libraries may be involved with. For example, AI literacy. Now, Here's the story between this image. And by the way, it's a movie. I wanted a picture of a lobster riding a moose eating blueberries because I understand just how annoying that stereotype is to you. It gave me a lobster moose eating blueberries, which I think is fascinating. So I'm not quite sure I'm ready to buy in that the AI overlords are on their way yet, but it's fine. I did the same thing in Texas. In Texas, they were trying to build a coloring book for kids that they wanted to do on Western history. And the problem was that all the illustrators they were working with kept trying to put saguaro cacti in these pictures. The big cactuses. There aren't any in Texas deserts. We don't have those beautiful cactuses. They're all scrub brush and oil and mean people. Anyway, so I was typing really quickly. I was like, okay, I need a cactus. And I typed in C-A-T-U-S. I asked for a caddis. And it gave me one. I should bring up the picture, but it was a cat with like spines going off of it. It was hilarious. So, here we go. Get it what's it worth. But I want to talk a little bit about what is happening here. Because AI is something that's important. And I want to do it. Do I have folks who have played around with doing some AI stuff? A few of you? All right. Stick with me for a moment. Because I want to, we hear it and it's all, yeah, sure. But what does it look like? So I want to do some show and tell. He hopes that it will do some show and tell. There we go. So this is a piece of software called Midjourney, assuming that my internet is going to play nice with me today. And if it's not, we'll move on. What's going on, kids? You were working before. All right, I'm not going to take up the time. Let's talk about AI for a moment, because here's why it's important. Try it, play with it, etc. But here's why it's important for a library in particular. This is me. It's a picture of me. I could go into a program. This one's called VO3. Doesn't matter. It's free. I can upload my picture or anyone else's picture, and I can tell it what I want it to do. So in this case, I wanted it to tell me how much I hate Maine. Everything works until you need it to. Hold on one second, folks. It's worth it. My guess is yes. My guess is yes. Okay. Try it again.
Don't go there. It's just a horrible place to visit. Nothing good there.
I didn't say that, right? There's a lot I didn't say. There's a lot going on right now. Being able to create images that people don't trust, we're there now, right? There's this wonderful phrase called AI slop. If you are on Facebook at all, you've unfortunately seen a lot of it. People just create images on a regular basis because they can hope to monetize and get loads. But here's the trick. If you have a telephone, if you've gotten an iPhone or a Samsung, or if you've gotten a cell phone in the past 2 years, built into the camera app is AI. It will change the image to make it look a little bit better, but you can also say, oh, I really don't want that weather, I don't want that water tower behind that person, click, and it goes away. Or I really wish Fred was in here, click, and Fred's added. It takes no technical ability, it takes no special training, it is literally pushing on a screen to make that happen. It is moving to the point where images that we have gotten used to trusting are now to the point where we don't necessarily know if we can. So when politicians say things like fake news has turned into it's AI, the problem is it might be. How do we begin to operate in a world when the things that we see as images or videos we can't trust? Now, why does that have to do with libraries? Because it turns out the four most trusted professions in the United States today are number one, anyone? Nurses, not doctors, right? Doctors tell you what's wrong with you. Nurses tell you how you're going to get better. Number two is doctors, because they still tell you what's wrong with you. Number three, the military. Soldiers. Yeah, it's been a long time since the 1970s. Number four, librarians, right? This is a place of trust. When you talk about having the archives aren't just a place to come and because it's nice. They come because it is history, and they know it's the history. In other words, they're not coming in because you have copies of, and can you trust the copies? They're coming in because they need to see the original item. There's a great story of a historian who was studying the bubonic plague and its travels throughout Europe. And he would go to all of these libraries, and he was studying he was studying the history of libraries. He'd go to the libraries. And he was in this one old dusty area, and he had horrible hay fever. And as he was doing his research, this gentleman sat next to him and took out this packet of old yellowing materials. And the guy then took the materials, put up to his nose, and went, took up another one, put him up, and went, and the researcher, who's horrible hay fever, said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm studying how bubonic plague moved throughout England." He said, "And how are you doing that?" And he says, "Well, here's the trick. If you're in plague time, in the Middle Ages, the last thing you want is for people not to come to your village. You are dependent on pilgrims, you're dependent on transit, you're dependent on travel. So the last thing you're ever going to do is, oh, by the way, we have the plague here. Dear Fred, come visit. By the way, you might want to bring some plague meds," right? Not something that's ever written down. So if you want to track that history, you can't look at what they wrote. But what they would do is they would write all these, "It's wonderful here. It's glorious. You should come visit. We have, a new stonemason." And they would take all the letters, they would put them in a big satchel and douse it in a barrel of vinegar to kill the plague. So if you wanted to trace it, you wouldn't read it, you'd smell it. That having the original materials, having it, the library becomes not just a nice place, but in some ways an arbiter of reality. Did this happen? Is this true? Can I trust this? Did that work the way I thought it did? Libraries are using their trust as a way of saying, that is an original image. That did happen. I can find that for you. I can connect that material to you. AI, as it is very quickly diminishing trust in a larger institution, libraries have the ability to build in that trust, to talk about how we can prevent corrosive AI, how we can prevent the massive decrease of trust in institutions, right? It used to be, I'm not that old, but it used to be when a memo came from the White House, that was considered authoritative. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian, that just it's not believable anymore, right? We've changed how we understand the role of government. We've changed how we see the role of policing. We've changed how we see the role of politics. We've changed how we see higher education, right? We're changing these things. What institutions can give us some support in doing it? How can we build this in? I'm going to finish up here with my last one, because ultimately what I'm here to do is my goal is to recruit you to save lives. What I want to talk about from moving from serving to saving is not just a metaphor. I want to talk about literally how we can lengthen people's lifespans. There were two Princeton economists that were doing a study, and they found a really interesting demographic study. They were looking at lifespans. Now, for my history buffs out there, if you look at the lifespan of anyone who lives in the United States or an industrialized nation, since 1900, it has climbed steadily from the mid-60s up to the mid-70s. In fact, you could define an industrialized nation by increasing lifespans and decreasing mortality. How do we do it? Clean water, coronary heart disease, statins. I'm on mine, right? We've been able to take this on. Cancer treatments, chemotherapy, radiation. We have lengthened lifespans. And these economists were looking at it, and they were looking in particular at middle-aged white men, which, as we all know, is an unprivileged class in this country. And they found, for some reason, middle-aged white men were dying earlier than they were. It started in the mid-90s. Lifespan was decreasing. And they were trying to figure out why. They began looking at other groups. They found out that it wasn't just middle-aged men, it was middle-aged women, it was across any demographic. They found that suddenly this group was dying, and when they looked for a common thread, what they found was a 4-year college education. Now, this is where I could stop and advertise for my chosen profession. But it wasn't me. I would love to say I fixed it. Because college, the reason that was the demographic is because we screwed up college so badly. To go to college at a 4-year college in the United States takes money. If you can afford to go to college, you can afford health care, you can afford treatment, you can afford your medications, you are at a different socioeconomic status. And people who did not have that 4-year college degree, why were they dying earlier? They were dying from suicide, which is unusual because suicide is normally more higher educated and younger, unfortunately. They were dying from complications of alcoholism, and they were dying from drug overdoses. They were dying from what these economists call deaths of despair. People who felt that they didn't have power, that felt like they didn't have control in their world, were turning to things they thought gave them control or they thought they could control. And it wasn't until too late they realized they couldn't control it at all. What we begin to see is that keeping people alive, keeping them living longer, is a matter of how well connected they are to the communities of which they are a part. People who feel like they have power in their community. Not simply, do I know a bunch of people? We'll get to that in a second. But do I feel like I have a say? When I walk into this library, you guys probably have the strongest and most positive relationship to this institution, right? Several of you probably talk people out of the room when they ask you how it's going on in the library, right? Because you're invested. Literally, you're invested, right? You feel like, and you probably kind of feel like besides getting some nice food and listening to boring academics, you might make some suggestions that are listened to. You feel like you have some input. But when people don't feel that they have that input, then they disconnect. And when they disconnect, they lose resources, they lose connection, they lose possibility, they lose hope. And so what we see when I talk about saving communities is literally we can, and we have the data, and we have the studies, and we have all of this to show, literally this library can help increase the lifespan of the community members of Bar Harbor. I mean, I can say that definitively. Right? We do that not because we have great collections. That's fine. But do those collections help people discover new things they hadn't thought about? Do those collections help people just take a break from the stress? Do those collections help people apply for new jobs, start new businesses? Do those collections and those services and that building and those beautiful people in the back help them feel worthy? And what that looks like in South Korea and Pottsboro is going to look different. There are inner city, in New York City, there are libraries that loan out ties and jackets so that when people go on job interviews, they are homeless, but they can show up looking respectable. Right? We have people that are providing all different kinds of services, doctors. So in San Antonio, the health center, there's a health medical library. It has 0 books in it. That's not true. They have one room, which is their historical collection. But the rest of the library, 4 stories, thousands of square feet, not one book in the place. And it's one of the most used facilities on that medical campus. Why? Because, one, they have a ton of digital resources. Let me be really clear. There are things you can read, right? They're providing that out. But they're providing study space, they're providing areas of learning, and they began building video interview spaces. So, up until before the pandemic, do I have any doctors in the house or previous doctors? Right? You guys did your internships? Finding your internships was a big deal? Did you actually go visit? Right? How many did you visit? About 10. Pretty, and not cheap, right? And so the more places you can visit to find a better internship, the better, but the more costly. So the students that are there because they're on scholarship, because they don't have, they could visit maybe one and it was the local area, it decreased their opportunities and their chances. Through video conferencing, which became the norm during the pandemic and continued, they could do 10 and 20, and it could be the right place and the right connection. They were helping these people find that place and that connection, right? They were creating this. Now, I want to be really clear. There's a difference between being socially connected and being lonely. You will read things that will talk about the epidemic of loneliness. You will read a Surgeon General's report that will tell you loneliness is equivalent to smoking 5 packs of cigarettes per day. Not quite. Loneliness is also important, but it's not the problem. Everyone in this room has been lonely. Lonely is like hunger. It tells you to do something. When you're lonely, it means you want more connection. Different than solitude, I want to be alone. Lonely is, I wish I had more people to talk to. Our data shows that loneliness is not increasing. We're not more lonely. Everything you see about, well, social media and screens are making people lonelier. It's not true. We have about the same percentage of people in cities that report loneliness as 10 and 20 years ago. But they feel less empowered. When they go on those mechanisms of media and looking at screens, they find a life they don't think they can have. That's the danger. We have studies that show social media and increasing use of social media does not lead to more depression or less depression. It turns out it only amplifies what you have already. If you are a social person with lots of friends, social media is a great way to connect to them. If you are at home and wish you had more friends, it's a great place to get depressed. It amplifies this underlying needs. So when we talk about what the library can do, we're not talking about how to fix loneliness, but we are talking about how to give people power. We know, for example, loneliness is almost always correlated to major life changes. First-time parents are lonely. That's right. Babies make you lonely, right? Moving makes you lonely. Losing a job makes you lonely. So the services that we can offer out to that community to help them feel connected may be things like helping to find employment, parenting classes, yes, story time. Yes, there's that Pottsboro library, Jarrell Library, even smaller in Texas. Every Sunday night they have a reading group. And you go, oh, how exciting, a reading group. We have reading groups, no big whoop. The reading group consists of completely women over the age of 60. Okay, fine. Who are recent widowers. It's a support group. But this generation, that group of women didn't want to feel like they were a support group. They didn't want to feel like they were disconnected. But book clubs? I can do book clubs. It just turns out when we show up, we don't talk about the book. We talk about how lonely we are. Or we talk about how did I get this resource? Or we talk about Social Security or what have you. So these are ways in which we can begin to connect our community. And so we can begin to talk about how do we help people live longer. And so ultimately, my strategic plan for you, my thing for you to think of is not how are we more like that library in Korea. The answer is because we listen to what our community wants just like they did. How am I like that Pottsboro one? It may not be teen gaming programs, but we listened and that's how we began to do it. But ultimately, what we need to do is be joyful. Joyful and joy is a choice. Happiness is an emotion that comes and goes. Joy is a choice. And it's a choice in the midst of adversity. You choose to find the positive. You choose to move ahead. As you look at Bar Harbor today, as you look at Mount Desert Island, I do the desert because I never get it right, so I just run through it. As you look about what's coming up today, you have major challenges in front of you. You have challenges of inequity. You have challenges of climate change. You have challenges of crowding. You have challenges of governance. You have challenges and challenges and challenges. And it's very easy to pull away. But why you're here tonight and why I'm so honored to be able to talk to you is you chose to engage. And you chose joy. And you said, we can make this a joyful place. We can make this a place where the tourist and the longtime resident and the child and the retiree and the mother and the new resident can find connection and joy. We can find how I can become better. This place, that place, is a promise to the citizens of Bar Harbor that better days are available to us. If you are in your darkest spot today, you don't get better by waiting. You get in better by engaging. If you're not happy what's happening in DC or what's happening in Wall Street or whatever, it's not going to automatically get better. It's going to get better because people choose to make a change. They feel empowered to do it and they choose joy. And that's what I ask you guys to do. Thank you so much for your time this evening.